Part 54. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 534. He knew that the strongest totem master in history could no longer be trapped here, but his continuous revenge still caused immeasurable horrific losses to the Black Sky Society. In more than a year, a large number of Black Sky in order to rescue the Ghost Gate and destroy the Blood Pool, Shi Yinhua totem worked hard one after another, risking his own life. In their battle with the master of the lair, both sides suffered heavy casualties, which resulted in a sea of countless corpses on this red plain. In the absence of a supreme leader, the main commanders were also held back by the Yanjai Palace. The Black Sky Society's losses this time could be described as extremely heavy. In the situation where neither side has the strongest combat power, the master of the lair has a great advantage. This is also the first step of a revenge plan finally hatched by the master of the Heavenly God Palace after he obtained enough secret weapons to survive. King Enet's cooperation, his personal appearance as an inducement, and the blood pool set up in advance. After the Ghost Gate goes to the inner world, the control and interference of its entry and exit locations. This huge plan involves too many people. But it only blocked the Ghost Gate in the inner world, making it impossible to come back for the time being. And it's only for 1 year. Such a result. Kuwaitan royal capital. In more than a year, this place has almost completely changed. Garin Haiwan was in seclusion, with Ephesus and Konking guarding them on the spot. All matters in Kurosawa Palace were resolved through discussion among the elders. However, the newly joined elders such as Demon Phoenix and others had a very comfortable life. As a group of tribal white knights and little princesses who were rescued by Garin from the grassland, after joining Kurosawa Palace, a new force was formed. The leader of the white knights, Bai Feng, made rapid progress and was qualified to practice the true black water technique. With the refinement of Mai Wu, his strength suddenly broke into the fourth type, and the white knights of the wind, the most loyal to Garin, was established. In sharp contrast to the Black Knights of the Four Directions. After they gained power, they originally planned to go to their hometown to take revenge, but unfortunately, their enemies had completely left the place and were missing. Mo Huang and others spent the whole day eating, drinking and having fun, and lived an unusually comfortable life. They occasionally traveled to Bihai to check on Garin's current situation. These people were brought out of a small place by Garin. Although they had reached the point where they could not bear to part with this colorful world, the offer Garin was still deep in his heart. Even in the face of other people's attempts to win over him, he didn't dare to have other thoughts. Only Mo Huang and others are actually the ones who know the details of Garin the best in the entire Kurosawa Palace. In more than a year, she has completely recovered to the intermediate level of Type 5, but every time she faces Garin, I still feel out of breath. While the rest of the royal capital gathered their minions and recuperated in Kurosawa Palace, the three giants gathered a large number of totem masters and civilians who had taken refuge from outside, and began to establish 2 city-states outside the sanctuary area. The construction of the Big Princess is finally revealed. The Towers of Dawn, the 5 Towers of Dawn built in her territory, have the powerful ability to gather the power of totems and project them out thousands of miles away, and they also have a certain amplification effect. This will increase the strength of her totem masters in her territory by about 10%. This is a terrifying improvement. The profile also revealed that the eldest princess definitely has a top totem workshop master under her command. There is definitely the support of Grand Duke Bainak behind this. The Grand Duke of Kodi, on the other hand, worked hard to supervise the construction of the new city-state, and gathered a large number of ordinary workshop masters to build a super weapon called the Kars Cannon on the outer wall of the city-state. This weapon uses the totem light of 50 totem masters as its energy source, and can instantly burst out with extremely powerful terrifying power. It is said that it was an invention created by a young genius workshop engineer who fled to Kuwaitan, so this giant cannon is named after him. And the alliance of guild leaders, after absorbing a large number of foreign totem masters, seemed to have internal conflicts of interest. Several of the large forces fell apart during the struggle, and the political power changed. In the end, they became increasingly weak and almost fell out of the four giants' seats. Through Demon Phoenix, Garen was not completely isolated from the world during these times, but he was able to clearly understand the general changes and progress of the situation. Garen didn't pay much attention to other forces in the imperial capital. This information was just because they were too close. Kurosawa Palace was not involved and had a detached status, so he knew more. But compared to the incident on the other side of Sunia, these are not the focus. Among the countless news, the one that made Garen's heart jump the most was not the news about pharaohs who had died in the battle. Rather, it comes from the heart of life, the largest gathering of civilian fortresses in the world that Shanya once built. A large-scale epidemic occurred in the heart of life. Before the news came out, more than 100,000 people had actually been infected and died there. At first, the epidemic of this plague was forbidden to spread outside, but at this point, it could no longer be concealed, and the situation had reached an extremely critical level. The most terrifying thing is that this plague not only has a 100% fatality rate, but also transforms the dead into a monster like a living corpse. This monster aims to hunt living people and wanders around, even if the head and heart are completely smashed. Even if it rots, it can still survive for several days. This reminded Garen vaguely of the kind of living dead he encountered before entering the mysterious Yushan. The area around the capital city of that small country was full of weird zombies described in this way. Vaguely, he felt that this plague was probably related to Yushan. And Yushan is due to the black copper phenomenon caused by black copper. The root of the black copper phenomenon is probably the ghost gate. The situation has reached this point and is completely divorced from its original history. The ghost gate is temporarily missing, and the master of the heavenly god palace is also missing, and there is no news. The three major regions have already formed a temporary alliance, uniting to form a large force. Its territory is prosperously managed and has become the largest ideal living base outside Enite and the absolute sanctuary. At the bottom of the pitch-black abyss, a bit of cold blue light flickered, vaguely illuminating the surrounding large deep-sea area. In the endless abyss of the deep sea, a huge icicle group hundreds of meters high stands in the huge trench. In the icicle group, countless spiked icicles stand up high, like countless transparent and slightly black spears. In the center of it, a huge icicle with a thickness of more than 10 meters was pierced, which was the source of the blue cold light. In front of the icicle is a flat field of ice. Because it is in the middle of the trenches on both sides, countless seawater is condensed into ice by the extremely cold temperature. The entire bottom of the trench is completely filled with ice, forming a huge iceberg filling the trench abyss. The entire iceberg is slightly black and translucent. Behind the blue cold light in the center, among the huge icicles, there is a slender blond man frozen in the ice. He is motionless, his eyes are slightly closed, as if he is sleeping. But it seemed like he was watching whatever was in front of him. On the flat ice in front of the icicle, a handsome man with long white hair was sitting cross-legged. He was dressed in a white robe, with a silver and black belt around his waist, and a long white sword lying flat on his knees. "How does it feel to break through?" a clear male voice came from the ice, as if in a vast hall, with a faint ethereal echo. Ephesus gently held the hilt of the sword on her knees and shook her head slightly. "If I didn't personally guard here and observe the changes in the influence of the secret weapons around you, I wouldn't have been able to enter Type 5 so quickly. The originally estimated time was still not enough. Only a top genius like you can tell the law of changes in the secret weapon from these traces," Garen said calmly in the icicle. Ephesus was non-committal. During these times, after marrying Konkin, she had been guarding the abyss of the sea. The masters of Kurosawa Palace and Seven Knights Tower built a simple undersea residence here. But before the residence could be carefully crafted, the builders were forced to retreat by the increasingly intense and terrifying chill in Galen's body. The interactions between Ephesus, Konkin, and Garen during these times gave the three of them a rare tacit understanding. Effie is a person who adheres to his own principles very much. He took the initiative to stay and guard Galen and did not give up because the dragon demon's restraint was released. The dragon demon's shackles had no restrictions on him. In fact, Garen had never given him any forced orders, and the relationship between the two was just an ordinary friendship. For the two of them, whether or not the dragon demon is restrained makes no difference. There is movement in the heart of life again. Ennet's side has entered the finals. "How is the situation here?" Effie asked in a low voice. "It went smoothly." Garen did not elaborate. The two fell into silence. Silence was the most common way of getting along throughout the day. Both of them fell into their own worlds. Garen withdrew his mind and focused on the secret martial arts of life in his body. Most of the secret martial arts of the two disciples have been fused, and the Blackwater True Kung Fu has reached the final stage of dispersion. Because the secret martial arts of the two great disciples were torn apart forcefully, all their will and fusion power were absorbed as nutrients, and now there is only one left. I'll use my last 9 lives talent. As the core ability of Nine-Headed Dragon, the 9 life talent is very rare to be able to support it to this point, even though its speed is greatly slowed down. But at this point, complete decomposition cannot be avoided. The two living secret martial arts seeds in the body have grown to an extremely large and refined state after absorbing external nutrients for a long time. After a long period of body operation and fusion, Garen's body has completely adapted to the intensity of the operation of the secret martial arts of life. As the integration of the two secret martial arts deepens, the transformation of Garen's body becomes more and more unified, and the conflicts become more and more intense. Phew. Soon, I will be able to truly touch the secret of the secret martial arts of life. Until now, he has not actually received the inheritance of the secret martial arts of life. One is the conflict between two secret martial arts, and the most troublesome thing is that only after they are completely transformed can the real secret martial arts training information be transmitted. The secret martial arts of life and cultivation can break through the limits and reach the peak height. This is the general consensus among the top experts. The fusion of the two secret martial arts may not necessarily bring about good changes, but from the current point of view, it is not too bad. Although many parts of the conflict were discarded, the remaining seed parts still had extremely terrifying aura fluctuations. After receiving the inheritance, and with the huge accumulation of Blackwater True Skill and these time-born secret martial arts, Garen is fully confident that he can reach an extremely high level in a short time. After all, he also has a very high level of secret martial arts. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 535. A few months later, the Ennet King's capital. There were more than a dozen giant white hot air balloons flying in the blue sky. They were pulling banners with celebratory messages for the Totem King finals. In the center of the royal capital, on the Champ de Mars Square, elite players from all over the world lined up in their respective teams and waited quietly in the square. There were huge crowds of people around, nobles, civilians, craftsmen and merchants. Almost half of the people in the royal capital gathered here. Looking around, there were blackheads everywhere. Everyone was just whispering and exchanging information, but there was still a clear buzz. In the center of the square is a circle of diamond-shaped silver exquisite railings, delineating a separate area. Standing inside are the totem masters of the finals. They all have different styles, some look calm, some sinister, and some are gentle and polite, with a calm face. Expressive. Behind each person is his most trusted lieutenant. King Ennet has held various competitions in the past and has always had an excellent reputation. If not for this, the elites from various countries would not have rashly believed that he would take such a large amount of resources and wealth as a reward to advance to the finals. In the center is a hollow white altar carved with countless patterns. At the foot of the golden statue of the god of war, two thick books are placed on two spike-like white gold platforms. Two priests stand behind the books, flipping through the books and shouting loudly. The final prayer was recited. There were more than a dozen beautiful girls on the side holding water bottles, and they gently sprinkled a little water soaked in flower petals on the heads of all the contestants. Then the player representatives came forward to salute, and different auras naturally aroused on their bodies, which were recorded by a special record officer to prevent imposters. Finally, the prosecutor came forward to check the allowed items carried by the players one by one. The deep black door of Yonjai Palace slowly opened. The finals. Start now. An old voice was set through the loudspeaker, resounding throughout the sky of King Enet's capital. Bang bang bang. White gold fireworks suddenly bloomed in the sky, and then white gold light spots slowly fell down like raindrops. Bursts of heavy bells came from afar. The female priests loudly sang the eternal hymn of the giant statue, and the sound actually turned into a substantial silver transparent note, floating in the sky. The holy sun stood on top of the three holy pillars in the capital, and worked together to unleash all their power. With three crisp sounds, three sky-high white gold light pillars pierced into the sky, seeming to extend to an invisible end in the clear air of the fence. Universe. The contestants in the finals entered the Yonjai Palace under the leadership of the guide. At this moment, leaders from countless places around the world were paying close attention to the developments in King Enet's capital. Analytical reports and prediction texts are constantly placed on the leaders' desks. The radio reported all the happenings at the scene in real time. Just as they entered the team, a figure in black robes raised his head slightly, and the corners of his metallic gray mouth curved slightly. Somewhere between the three realms, on a gray-white mountain cliff, the Black Prince sat quietly on an overlapping gray-white rock on the cliff. He was wrapped in pitch-black armor, and no face could be seen. Only the faintly flashing red eyes in the helmet gave people a beast-like violent feeling. There were two other people on the cliff. A tall man with long black hair hanging down his shoulders, and a huge black horse standing next to him. But whether it was a person or a horse, thick black smoke was emitting from them all the time. Another woman was dressed up all over, wearing a gorgeous and exquisite red dress with a long skirt trailing behind. She wore a silver and black fan-shaped crown, and her fair and beautiful face had a mysterious smile from time to time. The design of the Master of the Heavenly God Palace and the King of Enet has trapped the Ghost Gate for more than a year. Now it seems that the Ghost Gate cannot find the Master of the Heavenly God Palace, but went directly to the Enet Yonjai Palace. I don't know if this time who will win, the woman in the red dress said softly, as if talking to herself or asking the other two. Enet's chance of winning is less than 30%, the knight leading the black horse replied in a low voice. The Black Prince looked up at the Black Knight. If the situation really comes to its worst, I will not back down. His voice was hoarse and dry, like the deep roar of some kind of beast. With the core of the three realms as the foundation, countless secret treasures as the bones, and all the origins of the three of us as blood, we can never let the Ghost Gate or leave the Yonjai Palace. The woman in the red dress gently lifted her hair on her shoulders, but there was a look on her face. There is no heaviness or tension at all. I wonder how much power of protection will remain in the three realms after this time. The three people in the three domains all have their own ideals and wills. Those who obey the Black Sky Society's Ghost Society will prosper, and those who rebel will perish. After killing Philos, if Enet is defeated again, it will be their turn in the three domains. At the time of life and death, the lords of the three realms finally met again. The three of them fell into a tacit silence for a while. No one spoke again. They seemed to be waiting for something. I don't know how long it took, but three white thin lines of light suddenly lit up in the far distance, shooting straight into the sky. Start, that's the moonlight from Yonjai Palace. The woman in the red dress looked towards the beam from a distance. The Black Knight mounted the giant horse and flicked the reins. The black smoke giant horse suddenly walked slowly in that direction. The crisp sound of hoofbeats seemed to be unaffected by any noise and went directly into the heart of the person. Not long after, the giant horse stepped out of the cliff and trampled directly into the air, as if walking on flat ground. The red light in the Black Prince's eyes suddenly lit up. He straightened up and his whole body gradually became transparent. A green light flashed next to the woman in the red dress, and a handsome male swordsman with a cold face appeared. He blocked the woman's waist with one hand. There was a sound of swords under the two people's feet, and a green light curtain flashed out of thin air, holding the two people and flying towards the beam of light. Go. Here we go. In a remote mountain forest somewhere in Dongzhou, in front of a small wooden house, stood an old man in a white robe with white beard and hair. He raised his head and looked at the continuous drizzle in the sky. His eyes seemed to penetrate the clouds and see the invisible changes after that. Behind the old man stood two identical young men in white clothes. One of them had silver eyes and was carefully adjusting the folds of the old man's robe. "It's been so long since you've come out to bask in the sun, Mr. Nova, what are you going to say?" In a nonchalant manner. It was obviously not the first time that the young man heard the old man talking like this. The other person was a younger man, and he just smiled slightly when he heard this. "I'm not joking this time." And the old man's expression was serious. "When did you not say that?" Baker's stone eyes were speechless. The old man turned around and suddenly grabbed Yan's wrist. "Leave me alone and go do what you should do. It's not worth spending your time on a rotten old man like me who is about to die." The old man's face was unusually solemn. Baker's stone eyes and another young man seemed to finally realize that this time the old man seemed to be really serious about it. He stopped what he was doing and met the old man's gaze. "Mr. Nova, are you serious?" The old man let go of his hand and was silent for a moment. "Yuan Guang has appeared. It's time to really use what the two presidents and us old guys have prepared for you." Bei Xian's heart was suddenly shocked. The president of the Daihua Club died at the hands of Gaiman, and all the participating elders were also killed in one sweep. Only the bad old man in front of him was left in the entire Daihua Club. He was seriously injured, but there were only less than months of his life. Gaiman did keep his promise to let go of Daihua Shi, but his commander was not so easy to let go. The relationship between Xian and these old men is not very good. When he came back this time, he accompanied the previous generation Thor Hanat to find a place to recuperate. Unexpectedly, he accidentally saved Mr. Nova. After getting along for a while, Nova thoroughly transferred all his knowledge. He and his assets were all entrusted to Xian, and because of his relationship with teacher Xian also truly recognized this old wise man in the process of getting along with him. At this time, when he heard that the president and elders had already expected such an outcome, and even made preparations in advance, Baker Xian's heart felt a little heavy. "Take everything from Daihua Club and go to Yanjai Palace to stop the Ghost Gate," Nova said in a low voice. "I don't know when." A red gem like a thorn ball was gently placed on Baker's stone eye hand. "The goal of the gate of hell is the gate of heaven. There is no need for us to actively stand in front of it," another young man suddenly said. "There will be a huge price to pay for pulling the gate of heaven. As long as we wait for the right time, it will be our chance to work together to kill the gate of hell." "Yes, Mr. Nova, why do we have to prevent the gate of heaven from appearing?" Baker's stone eyes did not approve of taking action at this time. "Their power is too weak, and a head-on confrontation is simply not enough for the Black Sky Society to suppress them." Nova let out a long breath. Gaiman doesn't want to use his own power to pull out the gate of heaven. Using the power of Yanjai Palace is his real purpose. Philos is dead, and if Ennet is also dead, then no one can stop the desire of hell. Baker and Stone Eyes felt a little heavy in their hearts. They were not actually touched by the death of the president or the elder. After all, they were too far apart. But after listening to Nova talking about such a situation, both of them had a clear judgment on the overall situation. Since the ghost sect has promised to let us go, why do we continue to join in? Baker Sheehan asked his biggest doubt. Let the Daiwa Club go. Nova's face showed a sarcastic smile. What he wants is an obedient Daiwa Club, a secret society controlled by his people, not an original enemy organization like us. And it's not that we want to cause trouble for them, but that they won't let us go. Nova suddenly smiled mysteriously. Listen, they are coming. At the same time, subtle footsteps could be heard faintly in the surrounding mountains and forests, densely packed, and slight beast roars could be heard from time to time. A gray film suddenly covered the entire sky. Wow! The sound of chains suddenly sounded from mid-air. The figure of Shinaun slowly emerged in front of the hut. He had a bald head and countless fine black chains wrapped around his body. His hawk-like eyes instantly focused on old Nova. I didn't expect that there are still remnants that haven't been cleaned up, Nova Cotman. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 536. Only then did Baker and Stone Eyes react and stood in front of the old man. Seeing more and more silver totems appearing around them, both of their faces suddenly became extremely ugly. I'll stop him. You take Mr. away, another young man shouted suddenly. No one can leave today, Shinaun smiled coldly. Nova, hand over the flower of the earth. Only in the hands of President Gaiman can a secret treasure like that be of maximum value. However, Nova did not look panicked at all, but suddenly showed a mysterious smile towards Shinaun. Puff! Suddenly a golden flash of light lit up in front of everyone's eyes. The two people's eyes were blurred and they couldn't see anything. Great teleportation technique. Nova, how dare you? Hearing Shen Yun's frightened and angry voice, his heart suddenly became anxious. He stretched out his hand to grab Nova's direction, but suddenly missed it. A few days later. North Sea Abyss. Garen's figure frozen in the icicle suddenly moved slightly. In the square in front of the icicle, in the distance in the darkness, subtle footsteps were slowly heard. Ephesus accompanied Konkin to collect medicinal materials. Now he is the only one here in the entire sea abyss. This is the bottom of the deep sea, the darkest and coldest place in the entire North Sea. Under normal circumstances, no one dares to come here. But there are obviously exceptions at this time. The footsteps became clearer and clearer, and someone slowly walked out of the darkness. This square has been isolated from the sea water by special technology, forming a huge cavity. The sound continues to echo in the ice square, like the echo of the valley. Pa 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 pa. The visitor stopped in front of Garen. He was a figure shrouded in black mist. He could not clearly see his clothing, appearance, skin color, or even hair color. The other party raised his head slightly and stared at Garen suspended in the huge icicle. I've set a stage. I wonder if Lord Galen is interested in participating. The figure's voice was neither male nor female. It was completely neutral and had obviously been processed, making it impossible to tell the gender. Oh, an ethereal man's voice came out from the icicle. You hidden guy, I don't even know your identity. You sneaked into the abyss of the North Sea just to say such an inexplicable thing to me. The figure smiled slightly. Although it was obscured by the black mist, you could still feel that he was smiling. The world is balanced, and the success and failure of all things will depend on this battle. Whatever you pay, you will get. Isn't this the law that the universe follows? Garen said nothing and continued to listen to what the other party said. The North Sea and the entire hundreds of nautical miles have become a highly toxic sea-restricted area. The Palace Master is willing to lurk here for a year. In such a harsh environment, at the cost of losing strength, don't you want to have further power? After the words fell, the entire ice square fell silent. Garen looked at the other party calmly. "Are you just here to be a lobbyist?" he suddenly said. "Of course not," the figure laughed again. "I'm here to give you an unexpected surprise." As soon as he finished speaking, the figure suddenly turned into a black mist, flowing towards the icicles. As soon as the black mist touched the icicles, it made a hissing corrosive sound. Not long after, the black mist completely penetrated the icicle, and all of it got into Garen's mouth and nose. Time passed minute by minute, and finally, Garen was slightly shocked and opened his eyes again. King Ennet is such a generous hand, Garen finally showed a satisfied smile on his face. At the same time, a huge vibration suddenly came from the direction of Ennet. Even the abyss of the North Sea can feel the clear oscillations of the water. Garen happily absorbed the gifts given by King Ennet. She failed. In the secret battle in Yonjai Palace, the Ghost sect forcibly defeated the most powerful giant god soldier stone statue. She controlled it with spiritual magic and silently became the puppet of the Ghost section, but this powerful woman did not give up. She sent her remaining key knowledge and memories into the prepared clones as a gift to Garen. This is what she calls the stage. Yes, the stage has been set, and all that's left is for the protagonist to appear. With a chuckle, Garen's eyes turned black again. Royal capital of Ennet. Countless Ennite local masters, diplomatic envoys from various countries, totem masters, and representatives of large and small forces are all waiting for the reopening of Yonjai Palace and the final result. The pink petals were flying like raindrops, and the music of the hymn turned into countless small silver light spots, flying and dancing over the entire rock city. In one of the 5 major districts in the city, there is a hidden noble high-rise building. Gerda sat calmly in front of the window on the 3rd floor. Sitting opposite him was a familiar face of a woman. Jessica. "Aren't you happy to see me?" Jessica sat opposite with a smile, wearing a moon-white dress, with her hands crossed on the table, looking free and heroic. "How are our children? Is everything going well?" Gerda fell silent and did not reply. He turned his face and looked out the window. The pink petals and silver light spots were flying like snowflakes, accumulating a thick layer on the roof across the street. The entire Ennet King became a shining silver light, and every building seemed to be coated with a layer of silver fluorescent powder. There are not so many accidents in the world. Why did you choose to come back at such a critical time? I don't know, Jessica shrugged. Maybe that's what a controlled totem is, it can't help itself. It's like a boat drifting in the sea. You don't know when a wave will completely sink it. Looking at Gerda's much more mature face, Jessica smiled slightly. Goth, do you want us to go back to the past together, to the very beginning and the happiest days? She softly softened her voice and looked tenderly at the first and only man in her life. That was the best time in my life. Gerda forced a smile, but for some reason, there was a trace of inexplicable sadness. That person said that as long as you can do one thing to help, she will let go of her control on me. Jessica smiled sweetly. Looking at Jessica's sweet and familiar smile, Gerda suddenly felt sad and couldn't help but close his eyes. Vaguely, he knew that there seemed to be something extremely pure in his life that was slowly being broken. Jessica on the opposite side stood up, walked over quietly, and hugged Gerda's head into her chest. I know that you are the only person in this world who loves me the most. You are the only one. She rested her chin on Gerda's head, a mixture of resentment, pain, and madness faintly appearing in her eyes. As long as you destroy Garen's life, she will let me go. No one knows that after Garen angered the Black Sky Society again and again, she was always controlled and used as a tool to vent her anger. She was seriously injured and nearly died again and again, and was tortured countless times. She could only be imprisoned in this place all day long. In the filthy water prison deep underground, they feed on cockroaches and small insects. Before coming, she was severely beaten again. The woman who suddenly appeared changed her ways and tortured her continuously. She didn't know what kind of stimulation the other party received, but Black Sky Society obviously suffered another loss at the hands of Garen. But it doesn't matter, she's used to it. Such a severe beating not only brings pain, but also a vague and inexplicable pleasure. Compared to the torture these days, this is simply child's play. But what makes her most happy is that she can finally be freed. All she needs to do is kill Garen, the rising lord of Kurosawa Palace. Why can she only stay in a cold and smelly water prison, while he can sit in a gorgeous and comfortable palace? While she was being tortured and beaten, they were enjoying, laughing, and laughing. Ha ha ha. Jessica couldn't help but chuckle softly. For so many days, no one looked for her, no one remembered her. She was forgotten in the corner of the world, living a life of darkness over and over again. The Black Prince lay quietly on his mother's chest, like a newborn baby, with a nostalgic smile on his face. "If I can make the Dragon Queen wake up again, what are you willing to pay?" a deep male voice sounded from him. "Everything," the Black Prince replied in a low voice. With his eyes blurred, the Black Prince looked blankly at the envoy in front of him, who was introducing the current situation of the finals in King Ennet. He himself was sitting on the throne in the main hall of the embassy, with official totem masters from the dragon territory sitting on both sides. "I'm distracted again." Walking on the streets of Rock City, the excitement brought by the finals completely affected the entire royal capital neighborhood. Queen Annis was dressed in casual clothes, like a delicate little woman, holding the hand of the Azure Dragon swordsman. The two of them seemed like a sweet couple, wandering from stall to stall, buying some cheap but cute accessories from time to time. While squeezing through the crowd, the two of them showed no signs of impatience. "Can you not participate in this operation?" Qinglong's swordsman didn't know why, but looking at Her Majesty the Queen's cheerful smile, he always felt unspeakably worried. As he has been accompanied by the Blue Dragon sword all year round, he has an extremely keen sense of life and death. A faint uneasiness kept echoing in my heart. It doesn't matter, this time it's at the expense of countless secret treasures, with the energy core of the basic defense array of the three domains as the core. The three of us controllers just need a little authority blood. There will be no danger. We will get married when we get back. A hint of tenderness appeared on the cold and handsome face of the Azure Dragon swordsman. The breeze blew by, and the flying silver dots and petals gently fell on the Queen's long hair. Her milky white skin and pink lips made her extremely beautiful for a moment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 537. In the dark and gloomy Evernight Palace. In the wide-arched passage, dim yellow wall lamps cast a faint light, and the thick wall pillars on both sides were carved with circles of golden lace. In the passage that is more than 10 meters wide, a pair of triangular mirrors are inlaid on the ceiling every few meters. The clear mirrors reflect everything in the passage. Dang! A burst of rapid and abrupt piano sound suddenly sounded. It seemed like a violent beating, a hard press on the keys. Immediately afterwards, a burst of sharp rising piano sounds spread. From the deepest part of the palace, the notes spread out from the core in circles like water ripples. The sound of the piano seemed like someone was playing the piano frantically. There was no pleasantness at all, and no melody to be heard. It was just countless sharp short staccato sounds combined together to form a mixed and harsh noise. In the arched corridor, suddenly a figure in black robes slowly walked past pushing a wheelchair. He moved slowly and calmly, and his whole body was shrouded in dark robes. Sitting in the wheelchair was a white-haired woman wearing armor. The woman's eyes were closed tightly, and her pale skin was covered with fine beads of sweat. "What a beautiful note," whispered the cartman. "Your level of appreciation is really strange." The woman in the wheelchair managed to squeeze out a hint of ridicule. "What kind of emotions can inspire such intense music? I'm really curious." The voice of the person pushing the cart came from behind her. The shadows of the two people were slightly distorted in the mirror above. Strangely, the figure of the person pushing the cart flickered, appearing and disappearing, just like a woman moving forward alone in a wheelchair. The wheelchair moved forward. I don't know how long it took, but finally a white light appeared in front of me. It was the only exit from Yanjai Palace. It is the final passage to the outside world. Waves of deafening cheers continued to ring out from outside, ebbing and flowing like the tide, and there was also the passionate introduction of the announcer. Countless eyes looked in from the white light. There were beautiful girls standing in 2 rows holding flower baskets and preparing to sprinkle petals. 2 holy priests stood guard at the door, each holding a silver robe and a platinum wreath, which were the strongest symbolic rewards for being a champion. The person pushing the wheelchair wiped the woman's sweat, smiled softly, and pushed the wheelchair forward gently. Gilialo. The wheelchair moved slowly but firmly towards the exit, and at the same time, the face of the woman in the car suddenly turned pale. Welcome to the great lord of Yanjai Palace, King of Enit. His Majesty Senina. The announcer's excited voice shouted, and the dazzling white light at the exit made the woman's black pupils shrink slightly. She opened her mouth and wanted to speak, but strangely, her mouth opened wider and wider. Suddenly, thick scarlet blood poured out of her mouth, and the blood flowed out of her mouth like a stream. On the chest, flowing to the ground. In an instant, the entire exit's welcoming atmosphere suddenly became silent. After a pause, a sudden scream broke the eerie silence. The blood from the woman's mouth was flowing continuously, as if there was no end, completely dyeing the ground of the exit red, and it continued to surge towards the outside. A small lake soon formed. Screams continued to sound one after another. As soon as the emergency medical staff entered the blood-water range, they began to scream and get shorter and shorter. Their lower limbs and legs were completely corroded and melted by the blood water. After taking a few steps, their whole bodies tilted. Completely poured into the plasma. Clang clang clang. The heavy bell rang slowly, and the whole king suddenly became nervous. His Majesty has been assassinated. Help, and other exclamations and screams could be heard endlessly. Teams of guardsmen hurriedly gathered together. Dozens of small dots flew up towards the exit of Yanjai Palace. Fly away, those are Enit and some of the masters from various countries. Bang! Bang bang! The hot air balloons in the sky suddenly exploded one after another, and the people inside screamed, and soon the sound disappeared. Only the balloon is still floating quietly in the sky. Looking down from the sky, in the center of the entire rock city, a small blood spot is rapidly spreading to all sides. From the size of a fingernail at the beginning, it soon became the size of a palm, and then the basin area, and it is still spreading rapidly in all directions. All living creatures contaminated by the blood, not a single one survived, whether they were ordinary people or totem masters, all melted like candles and became part of the blood. In the peripheral part of the blood lake's expansion, countless residents fled from their residences and swarmed toward the outside of the city. Countless people were squeezed to death and trampled to death, and then melted by the spreading blood. Shops, markets, and residential areas are all in chaos. The screams and screams gathered into a noisy wave, one after another, and nothing could be heard at all. At this moment, 3 white light spots suddenly flew up in the city. Everyone, we're in trouble, a solemn female voice came from a spot of light. The Queen is welcome. This is what we are supposed to do. Your Majesty must be rescued. Your Majesty is dead. Impossible. A second wave of numerous white light spots flew up, suspended above the sea of blood. These are at least Type 4 totem masters from various countries. The 3-domain joint plan, coupled with King Enet's planning, the entire lineup covers almost all the top totem masters in East Continent. Stop arguing, a deep roar suddenly sounded from among the first 3 light spots. Activate the Great Starry Sky Sacrifice technique. In the white light, Goth's eyes seemed to be burning with fire. He stretched out his right hand and slashed his wrist with a dagger, and scarlet blood suddenly dripped down. The other two, Queen Annis and the Black Prince, also extended their hands and made the same move. Click. Countless white arcs began to flash among the crowd. In a moment, with the three domain masters as the core, a white lightning network suddenly formed. The entire power grid actually covers the entire sky above Rock City. Judgment, Queen Annis screamed violently. A huge eye-shaped current hole suddenly formed between countless power grids. With a sneer, a huge white fleshy tongue popped out and flew straight down. The tongue is hundreds of meters wide, and its length seems to be endless. It protrudes from the electric cavity, continuously extending and twisting, and is covered with countless white disgusting mucus. Buzz. At this moment, the earth shook, and countless buildings and houses in Panchi City collapsed, one after another, like toy fortresses made of building blocks. A small whirlpool suddenly appeared in the middle of the already huge sea of blood. The whirlpool grew from small to large, getting bigger, and it spread to the entire blood sea in just a few seconds. Boom! A giant black and red hand suddenly stretched out from the sea of blood, just hitting the giant white tongue in the sky. Judgment! Gerda roared violently. The sky suddenly became gloomy, and countless black clouds and smoke gathered above the lightning net. The dark, low clouds rolled in and out, making it almost suffocating. Click. A flash of bright lightning flashed across, illuminating the faces of some of the people and totem masters below who had barely escaped from the city. At this time, a large circle of figures in white robes had gathered around the entire rock city. Most of them were priests from Ennet, but there were also top totem masters from the three regions mixed in among them. They raised their arms high, and their bodies were filled with countless strands of fine black smoke, which continued to gather into the black clouds in the sky. Behind these white-robed men, there was another circle of red-robed men, holding various secret treasures that shone with light. These secret treasures continued to slowly decompose and turned into countless light spots floating in the sky. The dark clouds and thick smoke in the sky quickly changed and condensed. A huge human figure bulged out from the clouds, strong and huge, looking like the upper body of a strong man. His whole body was covered in muscles, and his body was made entirely of black smoke. He was as big as a city. Lowering his head, he roared silently. "The world will put a mighty force on your back. Repent, sinner." It was a pure mental wave that turned into countless languages and rushed into everyone's mind. The giant stretched out his arms and grabbed straight towards the sea of blood below. At this moment, countless people are watching here through various means, and countless totem masters work together to support Ennet's live broadcast video all over the world. The three major domains, combined with Ennet, the remaining power of Shanya, and countless surviving schools that had lurked, gathered all their strength to finally fight against the Ghost Gate of Black Sky Society. In the center of the blood sea below, a giant hand suddenly stretched out again, as if passing through a towering giant pillar, and fiercely withstood the black smoke giant's arms. Among the three largest white light spots, the Black Prince looked up at the giant in the sky. He could feel the gazes of the other two. "It's just me." He stretched out his hand and stroked the inner wall of the barrier where white light bubbles formed in front of him. Tear. In an instant, he used his hands to tear open the inner wall of the white light barrier. "Black Prince, you!" A startled and angry roar came from outside. "Don't want." "Your Highness! Your Highness!" Loud roars came one after another, followed by countless noisy voices. The white light barrier that had been torn apart dimmed slightly, reflecting the strong shadow on the Black Prince's face. He smiled slightly and tried again. Hiss. The barrier was completely torn in half, and he walked directly out of the white light and jumped down gently. Welcome back. In the center of the blood sea, a bald man slowly emerged, smiling and looking at the Black Prince who jumped down. The Black Prince drew an arc in mid-air and landed beside the bald head, and the blood automatically made room for him. Following the betrayal of the Black Prince, the entire white power grid exploded and disappeared in all directions. Like white arcs of water, they fled crazily. The black smoke giant also retreated suddenly. All the totem masters participating in the formation were shaken, blood spurted from their mouths, and they fell apart. Some even exploded directly into a shower of blood. Some spontaneously combust themselves and turn into charred skeletons in a matter of seconds. The white light spot where Goth and Queen Annis were was suddenly shattered. The two fell out of thin air and managed to fly outside the city. They landed safely and were supported by several preparers. In the center of Rock City, the sea of blood slowly swelled with more and more giant hands. From 2 at the beginning, to 3, 5, 10, 20, 50. Countless black and red giant hands are like giant black and red pillars, getting longer and longer, constantly stretching towards the sky. Gerda and Anis looked at each other and took out 2 spherical cores shining with blue light from their arms. I didn't expect that it would come to this point after all, Anis murmured, feeling unspeakably heavy in her heart. Isn't it already decided? Gerda replied calmly. Without the Black Prince's black domain core, I don't know if it will succeed this time. Anis shook her head. Under the protection of everyone, the two of them looked at the countless black and red arm trees towering into the clouds in Rock City from a distance. The strong wind was surging, and the air was filled with the strong smell of blood. The ground was still shaking violently, which was the terrifying aftershock after arms stretched out from the sea of blood. In front of the countless forest of arms, all light was completely covered, and the world seemed to turn into darkness. Only the green light balls in the hands of the two people still had a faint green light. Facing the arm forest, dozens of them were like ants under the giant's feet, inconspicuous. They don't know what happened to the totem masters in other places, but there is no doubt that the first ring plan has completely failed. Although I don't know what other plans King Ennet has, I can only hope that the second ring will work. Gerda looked at the forest of countless arms stretching to the sky from a distance, his face expressionless. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 538. Sunia. In the evil god cult, all the evil gods gathered together and sat in the oval hall. The afternoon sunlight slanted in from the floor-to-ceiling windows on the left and fell on the long tabletop. All the sights of the evil gods in the 2 rows were focused on the oval mirror at one end of the table. It clearly showed the horrific changes in Rock City, the capital of King Ennet. Countless forests of black and red arms towering into the clouds, like heavy mountains, weighing heavily on everyone's heart. No one spoke, and the atmosphere in the entire hall was dull. Kuwaitan Royal Capital. In the sky above the entire huge royal capital, between the 3 peak areas, a huge square water mirror was suspended. The water mirror is composed of countless clear water, and it clearly reflects the scene of King Ennet's capital thousands of miles away. Countless residents of the royal capital looked up at the water mirror covering the sky, countless people prayed, and some cried bitterly, but most of them held their breath and quietly waited for the final battle to come. Letting the world know about the cruelty and bloodshed of the Black Sky Society was originally part of the plan. In a small building in the palace area, Hathaway and her sister Dani were taking care of flowers and plants in the garden. At this time, she was wearing a white apron and holding a watering kettle shower head, while her head was staring blankly at the huge water mirror in the sky. The 2 sisters looked up at the images flashing in the water mirror. Beside the towering forest of countless black and red arms, countless seriously injured civilians were crying and huddled together like black garbage, running away from the royal capital in fear. From time to time, cracks opened in the ground, swallowing up a large number of people huddled together. Some people tried hard to maintain order, but were torn apart by the claws of the Black Sky Society wolf totem who ran out of nowhere. The totem masters who were able to resist were also knocked down and surrounded by several powerful silver totems. The totem masters of Black Sky Society were like driving livestock, slaughtering and driving away the fleeing people around Panchi city. In other scenes, the battlefields of the remaining totem masters from various countries and the silver totems of the Black Sky Society kept flashing by. Almost no one was victorious, and there were too many silver totems. The most elite totem masters all entered the Yanjai Palace and never came out again. Screams, cries, crazy roars, death roars, explosions, beastly roars, wild laughter, countless sounds intertwined together. The area around Rock City was completely reduced to a bloody battlefield. Sister. Donnie hugged her sister Hathaway nervously. It's going to be okay. We have absolute protection. Hathaway forced a smile. But those towering countless black and red arm pillars seeped into her heart like shadows. The words that came out of her mouth made her even believe it. No one knows whether absolute shelter can withstand such a terrifying power. On the top of the mountain near the royal capital, in a newly built white manor. On the outside balcony, Aining leaned on a wooden crutch and quietly looked at the scene in the water mirror above. Behind him stood several of his disciples quietly. Teacher. Someone whispered behind him but stopped talking. There is nothing we can do. We can only wait, Aining replied in a low voice. The ghost gate of Black Sky Society is so powerful. He looked at the water mirror, and even through a long distance, the terrifying power was so overwhelming that he couldn't breathe. The more powerful the totem master is, the more he can understand how much power it takes to create such a terrifying scene. The Black Sky Society will eradicate all threats to it. They will not let us go. We also have senior brother Garen. With him here and with absolute protection, everything will be fine. Yes. The 4 absolute protectors must have countermeasures to deal with it. The voices of other disciples came from behind, but Aining lowered his head. In fact, everyone knew that after the death of pharaohs, the ghost sect was already the most powerful existence in the world. The Black Sky Society directed the great turmoil of mutated creatures. No one or no force has a good impression of them, and most of them hate them. Countless people have lost their loved ones, families, and their original good lives because of them. If Black Sky Society succeeds, the sky is shaking. Over in it, countless giant black and red hands were like spikes, piercing into the dense and gloomy black clouds. White electric arcs flashed like snakes in the black clouds. Countless black and red arms pierce the clouds, like countless pillars supporting the sky. All things return to silence. All things return to silence. A faint song came from the sky, spread around the entire rock city, and spread to the entire night. The notes vibrated through the air, spread across the sea, and flowed to Zizhu. The whole world, at this moment, sounded the same, synchronized and inexplicable song. Everyone, every resident of every country, can hear this faint voice, which seems like a chant, like a song, but more like a sad elegy. The black drizzle fell one after another without knowing when. Everyone around Rock City raised their heads and looked at the clouds in the sky pierced by the arm forest. Black rain fell on them, dyeing everyone slightly black. The rainwater was like oil, thick and smelly, like black blood. There was a faint gleam of light in the clouds, a ray of white and holy light. The pure white beam of light was like a sharp arrow, piercing the black clouds and illuminating countless black and red arms. A huge arched door of light slowly emerged from the sky, grasped by countless arms. The door frame is carved with countless fine characters and patterns. The white gold patterns have mountains, rivers, oceans, valleys, forests, snow-capped mountains, and so on. Looking around, it seems that everything above is flowing, not just static, but really like a living natural geography. In the middle of the door is a mirror like clear glass. There is only darkness inside, which does not reflect the outside environment at all. Countless black and red arms grabbed the door frame and pulled the door out of the void. The inexplicable singing sounds came from the door. The gate of heaven. Directly below the giant gate, above the rock city in a sea of blood, Floating among several white-hot air balloons, was a bald man in black robes. His silver-gray skin glowed dimly under the white light, and his silver-gray eyes looked at the huge white door, with a trace of a satisfied smile. Finally succeeded. At this moment, under countless black and red arms, in the sea of blood, a huge amount of sticky blood slowly spread up along the arms. Countless plasma was like tentacles, winding and crawling up the arm, trying hard to crawl towards the gate of heaven. For a moment, looking from afar, it seemed as if the entire sea of blood rose up behind the ghost gate, and followed countless black and red arms, rushing towards the gate of heaven. The sea of blood pushed the ghost gate and floated towards the giant gate. Getting closer, getting closer. Bang! A layer of blue light suddenly exploded from the surface of the blood sea, and the entire blood sea was stunned. Goth outside the city spat out a mouthful of blood, and the middle stage of Type 5 he had just entered plummeted, and he instantly degraded to the lower level of Type 5. When the power of fusion in the body prompted the explosion of the black domain core, most of it was instantly degraded. Queen Anis on the side held up the core of the rainbow domain and walked slowly towards the sea of blood. The green core exploded when she squeezed it. Bang! The sea of blood that wanted to rise again was once again stopped. A layer of blue light exploded again, and blue ripples spread and disappeared in a flash. Gaiman cast his cold gaze down and waved his hand. Queen Anna's figure seemed to be hit hard by an invisible force, and she flew backwards. She stumbled around on the ground like a broken rag doll, rolled far away, and then slowly stopped. With just one simple blow, she was completely hit. Blood slowly overflowed from under the lying body. No, a green light rushed from behind and landed next to Anis. The Azure Dragon swordsman knelt down and picked up Anis. At this time, a large net of pure blue light suddenly lit up in the sky, and countless huge rotating symbols in the net shone like breathing. The entire blue net completely blocked the sea of blood from the gate of heaven, and a huge and terrifying power turned into huge wind pressure, blowing fiercely in all directions. All survivors on the ground were blinded by the huge wind and bent down. World, Gaiman raised his hands and shouted. The sea of blood shook violently. World. He raised his head as if to shout with all his strength. A circle of blood ripples opened in the sky. World. The roar of the ghost gate overwhelmed the inexplicable chant. The countless seas of blood shrank for a moment, and then slammed upward. There was a loud bang. The giant blue network fell apart and was completely submerged by the sea of blood. Gaiman's face also turned slightly pale. He collided with the combined power accumulated by the two domains for countless years, coupled with the decomposition of so many secret treasures, the combined efforts of countless totem masters before, and the secret battle with the King of Enet at the beginning, a series of the battle, plus now controlling the Yonjai Palace formation, sacrificing countless lives to pull out the gate of heaven. Even if he is the strongest totem master in history, he is a little unable to bear it at this time. And there are already hidden wounds in his body, that is the injury recurred after the battle with Philos. Suddenly, he raised his head, his eyes were blood red. The sea of blood behind him suddenly accelerated, pushing him toward the gate of heaven. World. He roared. Click bang. The central mirror of the gate of heaven shattered. At this moment, the chanting stopped. On the top of a distant mountain, the evil god king was wearing a white robe. His eyebrows suddenly pulled apart and he opened a blood-red vertical eye. In the violent volcano, there was a crash, and a head emerged from the magma. It was the lord of the heavenly god palace. The scorching hot magma slid down from his body like dewdrops on a leaf. Under the endless abyss, surrounded by poisonous ice, Garen slowly opened his eyes. Click. The icicle suddenly opened a crack. The world is about to be changed. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 539. Someone once said that the sky was not originally blue, but dark and blood red. Pitch black with red? Do you think it's possible? Maybe. Some things won't exist unless we believe in them. Nova sat on a wooden chair, gently placing a brass pocket watch in her hand, with a faint smile on her face. There was silence in the hut, except for the faint chirping of insects and birds outside. The dark drizzle fell one after another in a continuous stream. Everything on the stage has been arranged. He looked out the window at the sky in the distance, but his body became more and more transparent and became less and less contoured. Senina really hopes to see you one last time. A breeze blew by, leaving only an empty set of robes on the chair. A generation of great teleporters finally died in a corner of the world that no one knew about. At the same time, over the entire Dongzhou, 3 silver meteors shot towards Rock City at high speed. From 3 directions, like a 3-point meteorite comet, a long star tail is pulled out. A violent rumbling sound passed through the ground, a huge noise that broke the sound barrier. Countless black clouds rolled in the sky, making it dark and dark, regardless of day or night. In the middle of the black clouds, the huge white door bloomed with dazzling holy light. The light pierced the clouds, like the only door to heaven in the abyss of hell. The 3 meteors spanned a long distance, like 3 sharp arrows falling heavily, hitting 3 directions of Rock City respectively, forming a standard triangle. The silver light shone, and the dull explosion rumbled, instantly sweeping away a group of surrounding silver totems of the Black Sky Society. 10 heavenly Jedi, in a ray of silver light, a huge green blade suddenly slashed out, and the huge blade light split a huge gap in the black clouds above in an instant. The tip of the sharp blade was like a green lightning, slashing towards the ghost gate in mid-air. Clang! Gaiman raised his left hand, bringing out an afterimage to block the front of the giant sword. The arm and the blade collided hard, sparking countless green flames that surrounded him from all sides like moths. In an instant, countless green flame moths fixed him in place. Tisk 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 tisk. In an instant, a series of green giant sword slashes burst out from the silver light, one on top of another, one on top of the other, and they struck towards the ghost gate with precision. 9 huge blades struck Gaiman like lightning. Clang! 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 Dang! 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 Amidst the intensive collisions, the figure rising from the ghost gate and rushing towards the gate of heaven was finally completely dragged to a stop. Sun God King, he suddenly turned his head and looked in the direction where the green blade was slashing. The silver light dimmed, revealing the green cloak of the master of the heavenly God Palace. He was holding a green and exquisite huge long bow in his hand. The bow was more than 10 meters long, far longer than his body. Both ends of the long bow were with its sharp blade. It is a terrifying weapon capable of both long range and close combat. Hiss! The silver light on the other 2 sides dimmed, revealing 2 figures suspended in mid-air. The evil God King and Garen floated quietly in the air. He formed a triangular formation with the Sun God King, the master of Tianshan Palace, and surrounded the ghost gate in the center. The Sun God King, the evil God King, Palace Master Kurosawa, and the great teleporter from the Earth Flower Club use the flower of the earth to teleport and bless instantly. It seems that this is the strongest collection of power on the earth now. Ghost men didn't look nervous at all, as if they were just chatting after dinner, watching the 3 of them talking casually. Is this the last battle of Sina? The evil God King had a heavy face and was dressed in red robes. He held a dark magic mirror tightly in his hand, and pale human faces were constantly twisting and floating in the mirror. He flicked the magic mirror. Laugh! A black beam of light instantly rose into the sky from below, completely engulfing him. The beam of light rushed high into the sky, quickly began to twist and deform, and then turned into a huge black horned human figure. It was a huge human shape formed by the twisted combination of countless shadows. The upper body was a human, the lower body was a fish tail, and it held a black fork more than 10 meters long in its hand. The tail of the bull-horned humanoid swung slightly. Gaiman's body sank suddenly, as if there was a huge gravity pressing on him instantly. The fish's tail wiggles again. The ghost gate's eyes suddenly blurred, as if everything was blurred, surrounded by faint shadows, and the weight of the body doubled. The fish's tail swung for the third time. The shadow under Gaiman twisted slightly, tisk. The shadow suddenly opened a hole on his left shoulder. At the same time, a bloody opening suddenly opened on the left shoulder of Gaiman's body. Hey! Gaiman suddenly grinned and his body shook slightly. Boom! A circle of black light was directly shaken away from his body and flew away from the sky in all directions. Sun God King, you have finally created your own secret weapon of life. His eyes passed over the other two people and landed directly on the heavenly God Palace Master, as if the other two were not worth mentioning at all, and he was the only one who was the heavenly God Palace Master. The only opponent. Garen stepped back slightly, with a mysterious smile on his face. In the void behind him, a pitch-black cross-sword slowly appeared in his hand. The blade of the cross-sword slowly deformed and became longer and longer. From over 1 meter in length, it quickly extended to nearly 3 meters. The whole body was pitch black and emitted thick smoke. Silently, more and more like a huge halberd. The top of the halberd faintly lit up with a bit of icy blue cold flames. On the other side, countless green jellyfish-like creatures appeared behind the fish-tailed humanoid transformed by the evil God King. Countless green jellyfish stirred their bodies and emitted a faint green fluorescent light, and their number increased. In an instant, as if contagious, most of the sky was densely packed with countless jellyfish, forming a sea of jellyfish. Do it! In an instant, the three figures disappeared at the same time. The jellyfish, black halberd, and green knife all shone brightly at almost the same time. With a loud shout, a pair of huge red butterfly wings suddenly opened behind the Lord of the Heavenly God Palace. There was a black pattern with a pair of eyes in the middle. The wings suddenly flapped, creating huge wind pressure and swooping towards the ghost gate. He swung the giant bow in his hand and cut out a huge solid green blade, which cut through the air and pulled out a bright green line. The fish-tailed humanoid transformed by the evil God King rushed towards the ghost gate first, followed closely by countless jellyfish, and suddenly accelerated like green meteors. Garen drew out his halberd with his backhand and waved his arms. The black halberd grew longer and longer out of thin air, spanning tens of meters in an instant. The tip of the halberd was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he and the other two people blasted towards the ghost gate at the same time. The three attacks arrived at the location almost at the same time. Stabs were accurately stabbed at the location of the ghost gate from 3 directions, and countless black and red giant hands were smashed in midway. Bang bang bang. With 3 consecutive sounds, the jellyfish was melted by the splash of countless blood and water. The green knife was forcefully grasped in the hand and pinched hard by the ghost gate. It shattered into countless green fragments with a bang. The fragments burned with green flames and fell into the sea of blood, still the same. It cannot be extinguished for a long time. Garen's halberd was also blocked by Ghost Gate with one hand, exploding with large sparks, but the moment the tip of the halberd touched Ghost Gate's arm, the tip of the halberd spurted out countless black metal spikes, bypassing Ghost Gate's arm, drilling towards his eyes and ear holes like lightning. Snort. Goemon snorted coldly, flicked his other palm, and a transparent crystal wall suddenly stood up in front of his face, blocking all the spikes. Black metal spikes were nailed to the crystal wall. But at this moment, the green knife stabbed him under the arm again, and the black harpoon hit his head hard from above. The Lord of the Heavenly God Palace, the evil God King, and Garen had already taken the opportunity to approach him. The green sword, longbow, black harpoon, and black halberd were striking at the ghost gate in the center from 3 angles. The huge 5-type peak fusion power formed an inexplicable cyclonic vortex, centered on the 4 people, and countless black clouds and smoke gathered around it, forming an extremely huge and terrifying vortex. Buzz. The ghost gate seemed to give birth to 3 heads and 6 arms in an instant, and the afterimages of countless arms swayed around him, and at the same time they violently clashed with the terrifying weapons of the 3 people. In an instant, the sound of metal clashing sounded hundreds of times, overlapping into a single vibration. The terrifying air vibrations spread wildly among the 4 people, and spread along the void to the earth. Cracks opened one after another on the ground, and the earth was shaking. Fear. Groups of transparent air shock waves fell from the sky and slammed into the ground, hitting the Totem Master team before they could completely evacuate. Screaming, crying, wailing. Explosion, madness, despair. A jumble of countless emotional voices. The clusters of moving Totem Master formations were vulnerable to the shock and aftermath of the landing. They were like an army of dolls made of building blocks, falling to pieces at the slightest touch. Some Totem Masters and Totem Beasts who were trying to avoid were thrown high into the air by the shock wave. They could not withstand the shock while still in the air and exploded into clouds of blood mist. Then that's Galleons. In a moving team, Goth raised his head and looked at the terrifying figure in the sky waving his halberd crazily. King Ennet divided his last wealth into 3 parts and gave them to these 3 people. The last hope of the world. Anis was supported by the Azure Dragon swordsman beside her, and she barely whispered. Raising her head, she stared blankly at the terrifying battle group in the sky. The 3 of them are the last resistance in this world. Call. The Lord of the Heavenly God Pallas drew his long bow, and 2 burning lines of red fire suddenly appeared at both ends of the bow, forming 2 arcs. The fish-tailed human form of the evil God King is getting smaller and smaller, becoming more solid, as if it has really turned into an ancient fish-tailed monster, and the outlines of the naked and strong black muscles on its body can be clearly seen. The halberd in Garen's hand turned into a long sword for a while, and a dagger for a while. Countless weapon forms were constantly changing in his hands, and the changes became more and more natural and smooth. The 3 men's terrifying attacks were as pervasive as a torrential rain. Under the afterimages of countless arms formed by the Ghost Gate, they formed a vaguely evenly matched situation. The sky is rippling and the earth is wailing. The entire rock city's huge walls finally couldn't bear it anymore and began to collapse and break. This 1,000-year-old city finally slowly collapsed under the terrifying collision of these 4 people. Suddenly a green light fell. Boom. Immediately afterwards, 2 more black rays of light suddenly struck down, violently shaking dust and gravel into the sky. The Gaiman's arms were covered with fine blood gashes, but he didn't seem to feel it at all. He raised his head, and the sea of blood behind him shook violently, and continued to surge towards the sky, pushing him to continue flying towards the gate of heaven. Garen struggled to get up from the huge pit on the ground, and a faint blue light rippled around his body. Ha 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 ha. He looked at his own embarrassment and suddenly laughed nervously. Isn't this exactly the life he wants to pursue? See a stronger peak, risk everything, and enjoy the battle and sublimation between life and death. Wasn't the reason why he started practicing martial arts just to see the scenery at the top? That's it? That's it, he murmured in a low voice, feeling that his whole body and the blood in his body were on fire. A more powerful fusion power surged out from the secret martial arts seeds in his body, and the ice blue cold air that seemed to be substantial centered on him and spread crazily around him, condensing hundreds of meters around him into one piece in a moment. Blue ice. After the fusion of the 2 secret martial arts of life, ice, and metal, what was brought about was not a more powerful secret martial arts system of life, but a practice system that was simply more suitable for him. Relying on his previous realm and accumulation, as well as King Ennet's final gift, Garen finally rebuilt to the last moment of the fusion of secret martial arts. But this was also the last moment that countless Type 5 peak totem masters failed to break through. Suddenly he raised his head and looked at the ghost gate in the sky. Garen's figure suddenly disappeared from the spot. As if making an appointment, the other two shadows flew towards the ghost gate at the same time. Boom! The four people collided suddenly, and with them as the center, a circle of transparent spherical vibrations suddenly shook around them. The shock this time caused countless towering arms around him to break, and countless pieces of flesh and blood splattered like rain. At this moment, the robes of the three besieging people were shattered, and their figures were completely unobstructed, completely displayed in the eyes of countless totem masters who were watching from afar. The Tiantian Palace Master's left arm was completely broken, and a section of his right leg below the knee was missing, leaving only a bloody cut. There was a crack in the middle of the evil God King's head, and he could actually see the sky behind him through it. He almost had his whole head split in half. One of Garen's eyes was blown out, leaving only a scarlet blood hole. The body was densely covered with tiny holes, but they were all frozen by ice blue crystals to prevent the wounds from bleeding heavily. In that moment of full force collision, the three of them all unleashed their maximum fusion power at all costs. Two clouds of blood mist exploded on both sides of Gaiman's waist, and his complexion instantly turned pale. In the distant royal capital of Kuwaitan, Hathaway suddenly covered her mouth, trying not to scream. She could feel Danny's hands tightening around her arms beside her. "That's Brother Garen," Danny's voice sounded beside her. Hathaway had previously thought that he had admitted the wrong person. In everyone's eyes, Garen was only a Type 4 Kuwaitan giant, far from reaching the peak level of Type 5 combat. But now when the black robe was completely broken, she no longer had any luck. That was indeed Garen, and before he knew it, he had reached a terrifying height that would move the whole world. But now, she would rather Galleon was still the original Type 4. Such a battle, such a cruel war, should not be something that a young man in his 20s can bear. A proud and complicated ache kept surging in her heart. Hathaway stared closely at the picture in the sky mirror. The man with only one eye was smiling. He was actually smiling. He actually showed the slightest enjoyment in such a cruel fight. It's true emotion that comes from the heart, from the deepest part. Another part of the royal capital. The eldest princess gathered together with the other giants and top totem masters in the entire royal capital. No one spoke. There was an oval water mirror suspended on the long table, and the terrifying battle scenes of Ennet were vaguely transmitted back inside. The eldest princess clenched the handle of the fan in her hand, her palms already covered with sweat, but she didn't know it at all. Her eyes were fixed on the water mirror, not daring to leave for a second. Looking at the crazy young face that flashed across her face from time to time, she felt an inexplicable fear in her heart. That young man who had always thought she had seen through everything turned out to have such terrifying and powerful power in his heart. Reminiscing about the scenes she had with Garen in the past, she felt a conflicting impulse that she didn't know how to explain. Waves of complex emotions of fear and awe kept growing in my heart. She glanced at the other two giants, among whom Grand Duke Cody looked particularly ugly. When they were fighting for the power of the entire imperial capital, unknowingly, the young man had far surpassed their level and reached the unprecedented level of terror now. He can even fight side by side with the Lord of the Nest, the heavenly god Palace, and the strongest evil god king of the evil god cult. Possessing terrifying power that can crush everything. The Grand Duke of White Knock looked calm, but his palms unconsciously clenched the armrests of the chair, almost leaving marks on the metal armrests. Everyone has extremely complicated emotions in their hearts. No one can imagine that the young genius who was once equal to them has reached such terrifying heights in just a short period of time. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 540. Kurosawa Palace. Countless disciple guards had already walked out of the palace, looking up at the scene in the water mirror in the sky. Lala crossed her arms tightly and looked at the terrifying battle in the sky. She only felt cold all over. The only prayer in my heart was that Garen would not die. Groups of disciples from Kurosawa Palace looked at the world war in the sky with enthusiastic expressions. It was a battle that would determine the survival of the entire world. The figure of the palace owner appeared in it, as if a spiritual storm swept through the entire palace. Unlike other high-ranking people, what surges in the hearts of these disciples is an unparalleled sense of pride. They gathered in groups of twos and threes in different places, on the steps, in front of the palace gate, in front of the residence, in the garden, by the square and other places. At this moment, everyone looked up at the sky and the water mirror. Some prayed devoutly, some shouted loudly, and some roared madly. All the disciples were shouting for the final battle in Kurosawa Palace in different ways. Ephesus, Demon Phoenix, and other elders stood side by side. No one spoke, except for Effie and Mohuang. Everyone's face turned pale, and they were so oppressed by the terrifying and brutal battle in the picture that they were breathless. Some people unknowingly brought themselves into it, and the result they got made them feel cold all over, and a mouthful of reverse blood almost spurted out from their mouths. People who don't understand the battle at this level are fine, but those who can understand it but can't bear the pressure of its strength are the most troublesome. They can feel the horror and the huge pressure of complex horror, and that pressure seems to be transmitted to their own spirits across long distances. The battle in the picture has exceeded the limit that everyone can imagine. It was no longer a mortal battle, but a mythical war. The black rain in the sky became more dense. I don't know when there was an extra voice in the faint chanting. Death. Death. Eternal death. It seemed like the howling of the wind and the impact of the rain. The absolute protective barrier above Kuwaitan seemed to be trembling, with circles of transparent ripples constantly rippling, as if some terrifying force was striking the barrier again and again. Jessica held Goth tightly and looked up at the battle group in the sky. Those four crazy figures have gone completely crazy, and they are like collisions and explosions between comets. Waves of terrifying shocks caused the earth to crack and the sky to tremble. Gerda clenched his fists so tightly that his nails almost dug into his palms. He could feel Jessica's eyes on him. There was a muffled roar, the sky became clear, and countless arm pillars broke. 3 balls of blood, centered on the ghost gate, turned the 3 people surrounding them into 3 bloody arms and pressed down hard. One of them flew towards the 2 of them fiercely. It's Garen's figure. Gerda saw clearly that Gaiman had obviously sent Galen here on purpose. Garen was severely suppressed by the huge black and red arms and crashed to the ground. The ground shook violently, and countless dust flew up. He coughed violently several times. He took out a small silver bottle from his body, unscrewed it and drank it hard. The body was too broken to look like, but an inexplicable sense of excitement surged from his heart. Garen took a deep breath and laughed softly. He could feel that the power in his body was sublimating with each fight. The battle with Gaiman was almost like walking on a tightrope, wandering between life and death. If he was not careful, he would be seriously injured and on the verge of death. At this moment, the Blood Sea arm in Panchi City finally couldn't bear it anymore. Boom! An arm suddenly broke and fell heavily. Then another one broke. The second root, the third root, the 10th root. More and more arms finally couldn't support the terrifying force that held the door of heaven for a long time. Even if the terrifying strength of Yonjai Palace combined with the ghost sect can be maintained for such a long time, it is already the end. Pulling out the gate of heaven itself is caused by a terrifying force that violates the rules, and now, this force has been supporting it for so long and can no longer support it. Garen couldn't help but laugh. He didn't know what was going on with the other 2, but now, everything was about to succeed. No, Goemon covered his waist wound, and the sea of blood behind him suddenly swelled for the last time, pushing him to the top of the wave and flying towards the gate of heaven. Die. The figure of the Lord of the Heavenly God Palace drew a line of green light and stabbed the back of the ghost gate fiercely from behind. The evil God King was no longer able to get up. The magic mirror in his hand was dim, and his whole person showed a sense of weakness and defeat. He lay in the pit, unable to move, and could only look up at the final battle in the sky. Garin struggled to his feet, and the black halberd in his hand roared into a black moon. The secret martial arts of life were on the verge of a breakthrough in the sublimation of fighting. With the performance of having broken through the ghost gate, Garin's terrifying intellectual attributes were spinning at high speed like a storm at this moment, and countless sparks of inspiration were blowing through his mind like a fragmented hurricane. The thousands of potential points that had been accumulated in the ruins for a long time began to fall crazily at this time. It seems that the sublimation of the secret martial arts of life will also consume countless potential points. Garin vaguely understood in his heart that what potential points can replace is the accumulation time of secret martial arts practice, and the power needed to accumulate can be replaced by potential points. And if you encounter a real threshold, a level that cannot be reached through accumulation, the potential points will be useless. At this moment, the countless fusion powers in his body were compressed crazily. The ice secret martial arts and the metal secret martial arts were constantly fused and intertwined, condensing into an extremely tiny seed at a crazy speed. A seed that seemed to be implanted in the deepest part of his soul. Vaguely, he felt as if his soul was flying, and a sense of freedom and comfort surged out from the deepest part of his heart like never before. That's it? That's it, ha 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 ha. Garin couldn't help laughing wildly. The laughter shook so much that the whole sky and earth trembled slightly. Gerda and Jessica stood behind Garin, and he consciously controlled his momentum so as not to hurt them. Jessica held Goth's hand tightly and pulled him closer to Garin. Goth's eyes were complicated and incomprehensible. He looked at Garin's back and opened his mouth to say something. Jessica has fallen, and he is unwilling to lose his best friend because of the tragedy of the past. Garin, be careful. Gerda is going to kill you, Jessica next to her suddenly screamed and rushed over, blocking behind Garin and facing Gerda head-on. Gerda was stunned for a moment and his mind went blank. Garin, who had some sense of it, was at the critical moment of promotion and was about to turn around. Laugh. A black dagger that looked like a living thing was stabbed into Garin's lower back by Jessica. The dagger instantly twisted like a snake and penetrated into Garin's waist wound. Gerda's mind went blank, and Jessica's twisted and proud smile reflected in his pupils. Garin was also stunned, holding his waist with one hand. Bang! A large hole suddenly exploded in his lower abdomen, and scarlet blood splashed everywhere with the explosion. A hollow that penetrated the flesh and blood of his abdomen appeared in the middle of his abdomen. A black snake flew out with a sneer and flew towards the ghost gate in the sky. But in mid-air, Garin grabbed it with one hand and snapped it into two pieces. Garin staggered a few steps forward, looking down at his abdomen blankly. The most critical moment of promotion was interrupted. In an instant, the power of aura fusion emanating from the secret martial arts seeds in his body was running wildly. The original bloodline of the righteous path was seriously damaged under the impact of the moment. He threw his head back and roared to the sky. A circle of terrifying shockwaves centered on him and rushed in all directions. Jessica was the first to be hit hard. Together with Gerda, the two of them flew up in the air and shot backwards, as if they were hit head-on by a huge giant. Gerda's vision blurred, and his body fell steadily involuntarily. He stretched out his hand to catch Jessica who was flying, but he finally slowly put it down in mid-air. He could hear the pain in Garin's roar. That kind of anger after being betrayed, disbelief, madness. He, die. Die, 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 die. Ha 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 ha, Jessica laughed crazily in mid-air. Her face was filled with despair and resentment, but she didn't realize that she had already burst into tears. Bang! Jessica's body hit a raised stone pillar hard, her head was pierced by a raised stone spike, and she lost any sound. Plop! Gerda finally couldn't help but fell to his knees, covered his face with his hands and cried bitterly. A green ring of fire suddenly lit up in the sky. The whole world was illuminated for a moment. The Tiantian Palace Master's chest was completely collapsed, and he was slammed into the sea of blood below, stirring up a column of blood that reached the sky. Ghost Gate took a deep breath, moved his gaze, and landed on Garen below. I don't know when Garen stopped roaring. The whole person seemed to be completely calm, standing quietly in place. The blood hole in his lower abdomen was as big as a fist, and through the hole the black ground behind him could be clearly seen. But at this time, the blood hole is being filled with countless red ice crystals. The ability attribute bar below his vision was undergoing crazy changes at this time. In the skill column, the Blackwater True Skill column originally had the words Unnamed Secret Martial Arts of Life, but at this time, with the promotion of Secret Martial Arts of Life, even if it is only incompletely promoted, countless amounts of terrifying information are still flowing out. Countless information is like a stream of ice blue liquid, converging on the skill bar, forming a dark blue vortex. A clear name emerged from Garen's mind. That is the name automatically derived from the fused secret martial arts. He parted his lips. The ice blue vortex stopped rotating at this moment and condensed into an extremely complex and powerful rune. A handful of blue ice crystal halberds appeared out of thin air behind him, with the tip of the halberd facing the ghost gate in the sky. Call. Garen's eyes were burning with ice blue flames. The flames completely covered the pupils of his eyes, and only two groups of ice blue smoke could be seen that were constantly escaping. Northern Halberd Soldier Hanyan True Water Evil Technique. Garen murmured in a low voice. The name of Mai Wusheng seemed to have some inexplicable magic power. Just by whispering it silently, a huge dark blue vortex slowly emerged behind Garen. It was a huge whirlpool composed of countless emerging ice blue halberds. The halberds were like precision gears, blending into the vortex and turning slowly. Garen suddenly raised his head and met Gaiman's eyes head-on. Chirp! The next moment, a piercing bird song rose into the sky. The countless terrifying blue ice halberds behind Garen merged into a huge torrent that was thousands of meters long, rushing towards the sky crazily. The piercing chirping of birds was the whistling of countless halberds cutting through the air. This is my dream. It's my only dream, Goemon murmured, his expression becoming more determined, and his eyes filled with the madness of a martyr. He suddenly raised his arms. The endless ice blue halberd rushed in front of him. In the torrent of halberds, Garen's figure slowly emerged. He held the halberd in his hand and stabbed forward silently. World. Gaimon laughed wildly and opened his arms as if to welcome something. Boom. The violent sea of blood suddenly exploded in the sky, and countless black and red arms were completely broken and melted into the sea of blood. Everything in the sky was completely covered in blood red. Surrounded by blood, Gaimon looked at Garen with hope, looking at the newly promoted sixth type who finally failed him. This is the top of the world, the height of everything. No one can see everything between the two of them through the sea of blood. Can you agree to my request? Goemon showed a gentle smile. His body was pierced by the halberd in Garen's hand, and starting from his legs, it was rapidly decomposing into strands of bright red blood. Garen was silent for a moment. You say. The smile on Gaiman's face was faintly bright. Enter the gate of heaven for me and see what is there. Garen was stunned. That's my only dream. Gaimon smiled brilliantly, his body suddenly decomposed, and a bit of red light flew in front of Garen. That was the purest secret martial memory, and it was the last treasure he left to the opponent in front of him. The lingering sound of the word dream was still echoing in his ears. Garen stared blankly at the last gift left by the Ghost Gate. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 541. Dream. It turns out that what Gaiman has been obsessed with from beginning to end is just his own dream. In the final blow, Garen used all his strength. Although Gaiman had been seriously injured and no longer had the strength to keep the gate of heaven, he still had the strength to resist the severe injury to Garen in the end, but he gave up and instead used the power spreads, allowing Garen, who is in better condition, to have the opportunity to enter the gate of heaven. Boom! Thunder rolled, and a bright lightning flashed overhead. Garen suddenly woke up from his daze. The severe pain in his abdomen, the near-dead state of his whole body, and the countless empty and terrifying injuries on the ruins made his peak energy suddenly dry up like a deflated balloon. He raised his head and saw that the dark clouds in the sky were slowly dispersing. In the middle of the black clouds, the huge white door was quickly retreating deeper into the clouds, and it was obvious that it would soon return to the inner world where it was originally. The strong wind howled, causing his tattered robes to fly up and down. Garen hesitated for a moment, and finally let out a long sigh. He reached out and grabbed the red ball of light in front of him. As soon as his fingers touched the ball of light, the thing instantly blended into his skin and disappeared. A stream of various insights about the strongest state of the 6 types, and various uses and understandings of the secret martial arts of life, all poured into Garen's mind. This is the last gift from the Ghost Gate. Garen let out a deep breath and looked up at the gate of heaven. After all, he still did not choose to rush forward. Any changes in the gate of heaven will be reflected on the entire planet. He does not want to become a second gate of hell. Wow! Suddenly, a heavy rain fell from the entire sky. The original black raindrops had completely disappeared and were replaced by completely normal transparent rain. The gate of heaven completely disappeared into the black clouds, and the rain became heavier and heavier. Amidst the rolling black clouds, flashes of lightning flashed, and rumbles of thunder continued one after another. The sea of blood on the ground did not know when, as the ghost gate disintegrated, it quickly faded and disappeared, as if it had never appeared at all from the beginning. The ruined rock city below was revealed. Garen was suspended in mid-air, and all the fusion powers of secret weapons and totems around him were completely withdrawn, and no extraordinary power flowed. He was just floating in the air, and the countless blood and halberds had quietly dissipated. After all the dust settled, he quietly looked at the apocalyptic scene below from a high place. The whole Panchi city was full of charred corpses, and the people of Black Sky Society had completely evacuated. The remaining totem masters and residents of Panchi city rushed back in 2s and 3s, looking at the ruins of their homes. Some people knelt down and covered their faces and cried. Some people were covered in cold sweat and were afraid, but more people were looking towards the sky. Garen bowed slightly, and then hurriedly rescued a large number of wounded people. The evil god king had been lifted up from the pit by the followers of the evil god cult, and he was dying. Obviously, Gaiman's attacks are not only physical, but also damage from 2 aspects at the same time to a large extent. Even the evil god king, who is said to be immortal, cannot be exempted. He lay on the dark stretcher, turned his head and looked at the slowly falling Garen, opened his mouth, but still didn't say anything. The Lord of the Heavenly God Palace didn't know when he left. He disappeared. When the sea of blood dissipated and the ghost gate was dealt the final blow by Garen, he chose to leave. As the master of the lair, his relationship with humans has always been hostile. The biggest enemy, Gaiman, threatened to die. If he, a seriously injured person, stayed here, he would be seeking death. Landing slowly on the ground, Garen looked around. Finally, his eyes fell on Goth, who was like a walking corpse, and Jessica's body, which was completely cold not far away. He didn't know what kind of feeling was surging in his heart. Jessica was secretly manipulated by the Ghost Gate, and a powerful dagger containing a trace of Type 6 power was used as a means of assassination, which also successfully diverted her promotion route. If it weren't for the large amount of potential points that were used to replenish and consume life potential, it is estimated that another totem master would have been seriously injured and vomited blood in the last moment, and his body exploded and died on the spot. But the potential attribute saved him once again. But Jessica, who was the tool of assassination, died in an unconscious explosion. Recalling the scenes where the two of them had been together, Garen felt an inexplicable complex emotion in his heart. Puff! He suddenly spurted a mouthful of blood. Scarlet blood fell to the ground and instantly condensed into a pool of red ice crystals. The sequelae of the severe injury just now finally broke out, and the force of secret force was used to suppress the injury, but at this time, it was finally unable to suppress it. Garen didn't have time to think too much. He suddenly jumped into the air, flew towards the distant sky, and disappeared into the sky in an instant. The entire battlefield was in chaos. After calmness was completely restored, countless totem divisions and civilian soldiers formed a rescue team and began to carry out search and rescue work under the arrangements of the major forces. Teams headed by powerful totem masters were also searching and checking whether the Ghost Gate was really dead. There is also the cleanup of the remaining Black Sky Society forces. Shortly after Garen flew away, the belated arrival of Baker Stone Eyes and his party finally walked out of the forest near Rock City. Looking at the dilapidated city from a distance, Baker Stone Eyes slowly put down the secret treasure of the Flower of the Earth in his hand. He hid in the mountains and forests, and used the ancient Yenduo secret treasure of the Flower of the Earth to bless the three people participating in the battle from a distance to ensure their will and spirit unaffected by physical injuries. What really sent the three besiegers here was actually him activating the Flower of the Earth in his hand and cooperating with Master Nova in the distance. Without this earth yellow delicate flower secret treasure in hand, no one would be able to teleport three powerful decision makers from various places here in a short period of time. Is everything over? A girl in red armor next to Xian asked in a low voice. She looked at the terrifying and dilapidated city in front of her, completely unable to believe that it was only caused by the fighting of a few people. Seeing the broken bones everywhere, she felt a chill all over her body for a moment, and her arms unconsciously hugged Xian's hand tightly, as if she could find real support in this way. Maybe Baker Xian shook his head and sighed. If that person is not the new Gaiman, maybe everything should be over. That person. A trace of worry flashed in the red-armored woman's eyes, but she didn't say anything else. Let's go and help rescue the wounded. Baker Stone Eyes patted the woman's arm and took the lead to walk towards the messy battlefield below. The land that had turned into pitch black was filled with deep ravines and cracks. Rescue teams composed of people moved through the middle, looking for any people who were still alive. In the distance, Rock City looks like a cylindrical cake that has been chewed to pieces by mice. The entire city exudes a sense of death and decay from the inside out. The captain of a rescue team stood on the edge of a ravine and watched with emotion as his team members lifted the Grand Duke Goth and placed him on a simple stretcher. Although this battle was won, the price paid was too high. Yes, another totem master nodded slowly beside him. More than half of the civilians in the city failed to escape. A rough estimate is that the death toll has exceeded 600,000. Not counting the missing people, the disabled, and the disabled. I don't know how many years it will take for Enid to completely recover from the trauma of this battle, the captain nodded with emotion. It's not over yet. The totem master shook his head. The scum of the Black Sky Society haven't been completely cleaned up yet. Sooner or later we will completely humanely destroy this group of lunatics, he said with a hint of gritted teeth at the end. Uncontrollable cries of pain could be heard in the distance, as well as the painful wails of a large number of wounded people. Although the two of them were not from Enide, they felt the same after seeing this scene. Such an organization, combined with the fact that they were the cause of the previous great turmoil, these bloody facts have made foreigners like them involuntarily regard Haitian. The society is designated as the public enemy of the world. That's right. It's not over yet. This is just the beginning. the captain saw the children kneeling on the ground guarding the bodies of their loved ones in the distance. Even he felt a slight tremor in his heart with the hatred in his eyes. He knew that in the future, the battle between Ennet and Black Sky Society would definitely become more brutal and violent. The world is in jubilation. Both humans and the masters of the lair are holding carnivals crazily. But in Ennet, more often than not, funerals are being held. Some are burials, while others are cenotaphs with only the relics of the deceased. Carving tombstones has become the most popular profession for making money, but they would rather not make this money themselves, because in addition to carving tombstones for others, many times their relatives at home may need a lot. Enite, Kawaitan, Shania. Dongjo, who was already broken, was finally completely released. Only a few years have passed since the Black Sky Society was born, and now it has completely collapsed. However, in just a few years, the whole world has been in a bleak state. The capital of Ennet King was completely destroyed, the 1,000-year-old city was destroyed in one fell swoop, the top strongmen and political power of the entire Ennet people were completely destroyed, the strongmen suffered heavy casualties, and the civilians were left empty. Kawaitan has lost most of its territory and can only hide in absolute shelter. However, some of its vitality has been preserved and is now showing a rebound-like prosperity and starting to regain its homeland. But it still cannot cover up the tragic situation of more than half of the civilian casualties in the country. Various industries are in dilapidation, and industries are in ruins waiting to be revitalized. Compared with the original, the loss was calculated in hundreds of billions of silver wheel cloth. Xenia, the entire holy land of the ancestral gods, was turned into a bottomless abyss by the Battle of Ghost Gate philosophy. Less than 10% of the strongest combat power in the country is left, and the download milk is completely controlled by the evil god cult after its return. But it is said that the evil god king is still recuperating in seclusion. In the battle with Gaiman, his soul suffered irreparable and horrific injuries. He overactivated the shadow mirror and made him pay a terrible price. In addition, Gaiman's continuous attacks after being severely injured, the evil god king is now dying. He can only huddle in his headquarters and linger. He doesn't know how long it will take to recover from his injuries. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 542. On the other hand, after the Sun God King, the master of Tianshan Palace, left mysteriously, the nest owners spontaneously gathered together and began to enter the underground in batches. The underground has been secretly cleaned up by the ghost sect, and nothing is left. Both humans and intelligent nest creatures have been completely wiped out by the ghost sect with a powerful plague. All the top experts have been killed after the ghost sect broke through. He was secretly shot and killed the Council of Elders, the strongest organization in mankind. It can be said that the underground is completely empty. Under the leadership of the Lord of the Heavenly God Palace, the master of the nest has avoided the competition with humans on the ground for resources and instead went to open up wasteland underground, forming a truly independent and powerful force. All that is left on the ground are some mutated beasts and low-level monsters with no intelligence. These are garbage pig-like existences that even the masters of the lair look down upon. Time passed little by little. The consequences of the gate of heaven being pulled out finally appeared. Whether it is a totem master or a mutated monster, the power of all totems and the light of totems begin to decline rapidly. The speed of strength decay is like a pool with the stopper removed, forming a huge whirlpool and madly leaking out all the extraordinary power. The battle at the Gate of Heaven was named the Battle of Heaven by historians from various countries. Harpers and poets and literati compiled this battle into poems, recited and sang about it. Countless songs and prose were published because of it. For a time, the entire post-war period, a brilliant and inexplicable literary revolution broke out. Corresponding opera drama novels emerged at the historic moment. The three peak heroes who participated in the war never appeared again, so people continued to beautify the myth and became the strongest symbols on the earth. Time flies, and the years fly by. In the blink of an eye, more than 50 years have passed. The ruins of the original rock city were already covered with green grass and flowers. The broken walls were covered with fine moss. Some tourists who come to pay homage to the history linger here, and a chain of hotels has formed in the surrounding area. Due to the aftermath of that battle, Rock City was surrounded by cracks and faults of varying sizes, making it no longer suitable for rebuilding the city. Instead, because a large number of tourists came to pay homage to the remnants of the war, a large tourist town called Panchi City was built in the open space outside the city. There is a white square in the city, with a monument to national heroes built in the center. It is used to commemorate the great deeds of the three king-level powerful men who were almost mythical, as well as the countless innocent people and totem masters who sacrificed their lives in this war. The afternoon sun turned the entire square into a hazy glow. Beside a circle of white flower beds, a mustached tour guide was vividly introducing the deeds of this place more than 50 years ago to the tourists behind him. Our peace and stability today are actually largely due to the legacy of the original war in heaven. Three great monarchs, the Sun God King, the Evil God King, and the Arctic King, are here to fight for their respective ideas and ideal, for the thousands of people and subordinates behind him, chose to fight to the death to prevent the ghost sect from destroying the world. That battle was earth-shattering, and even the 1,000-year-old ancient city of Rock King City trembled in fear under their shadow. The sky was veiled, and the earth was covered with scars. The terrifying power swept through the space like a myth. According to the memory of one of the original survivors, the situation at that time was simply, "Who can believe it, haha," someone in the crowd of tourists chuckled. The word haha has great destructive power for tour guides. This contains deep questioning, ridicule, and unrebuttal suspicion. This is the age of science and technology, totem. Can that kind of pseudoscience reach this level? Someone asked. It's probably because the heroes inside have been deified. I've also practiced a few activation methods for the totem, but none of them have any effect. They are all used to strengthen the body. However, the secret weapons left behind are very good, and the fighting skills are very practical. Really? I just discovered that I went to the city to learn secret martial arts from a teacher some time ago. It is said to be a secret skill passed down from family, and it is indeed very practical. What does secret martial arts look like in real life? I only knew about it by reading novels before. A group of tourists were minding their own business and had a lively exchange focusing on other topics. The tour guide in front of him shook his head speechlessly. This was not the first group he had encountered. Disbelief in the War of Heaven has become the consensus among tourists visiting Panchi City in recent years. Tourists who were originally half convinced immediately turned from half believing to complete disbelief after actually seeing it on the spot. There is no other reason, just because the traces left here are too terrifying. The rock capital was once a huge defensive city with a population of nearly 1 million, and it also had powerful defensive armaments. If it were said that the battle of just a few people could cause such a horrific scene, no one would believe such a story. Totem. Totem master? Even if that kind of thing really existed in history, would it be able to withstand today's increasingly terrifying firearms, bombs, and artillery fire? It is probably also a legacy product that has been directly eliminated by increasingly powerful technology. None of the tourists believed that such a terrifying battlefield could be caused by just a few people. Everyone always believed that it was a tragic battlefield caused by countless bombs and artillery fire. It was undeniable that the three king-level great men definitely played a decisive role in it. But the troops and subordinates under their command are the real heroes who should be respected more. In particular, in recent years, the continuous exposure of the miserable living conditions of the descendants of heroes and martyrs has aroused reflection in various countries to a large extent. The tour guide was deep in thought while taking the tourists to visit some ruins in Panchi city step by step. Nowadays, tourists from dozens of countries, large and small, in Dongzhou come here to admire the great historical achievements. Local residents like him, who have lived in the city since childhood, can easily support their families as a tour guide. Kadai. Villali and the others are out of school. Are you done here? A middle-aged man shouted loudly in the distance, standing at the door of a bar and waving to him. That was Jack, his poker friend who usually played with him. His son was attending a school in the city with his own son. Today happens to be the weekend, and it's time to pick up my son and go home. It's almost ready, the tour guide replied loudly. Wait for me for a little while. Good. The tour guide finally took the tourists around the last place arranged for today, and then hurriedly met the middle-aged man. The sky was already setting and it was a bit late. Hey. Little Baker. How are you doing at school? Very good. I can take care of myself, the silver-haired 11-year-old boy replied seriously like an adult. The two father and son squeezed out of the crowd of students at the school gate and walked hand in hand towards home. Is Mom okay? Little Baker looked like the master of the family. He was carrying a small school bag, his skin was milky white, and he asked with his little brows furrowed. She has to work overtime today and may have to go home late. The company has another dinner party to plan. But old Baker and Ms. Sean came over today and said they wanted to see their beloved grandson. I guess Madam is already in the kitchen making your most beloved grandson. These are delicious cookies, the tour guide chuckled. Really? Actually, I wanted to say it a long time ago, that cookie is too sweet. That's your grandma's love. But being too sweet is bad for your teeth. Isn't that what you said? Forward. I think I should learn to refuse politely. Little Baker touched his chin and thought deeply. The two father and son discussed and quarreled all the way home. The silver-haired Grandpa Baker was sitting on the sofa reading the newspaper, and Grandma Ms. Sean was indeed busy in the kitchen. The lady in red, who was still young at heart, rushed out with a smile on her face, picked up little Baker and kissed him. Oh, my dear little Jack, I wish you never grew up and were always so lovely. Please don't use adjectives like cute to describe your grandson. I think this is an insult to my character. Little Baker, whose full name is Jack Baker, struggled hard. Okay, stop making trouble. The grandfather sitting on the sofa put down the newspaper and looked at the little guy seriously. It seems that I haven't exchanged information with you for a long time, and your thinking has gone astray. Sleep with me tonight, and I will correct your recent thinking and style. Do you want to use your past experience? Great. There is another good story. Little Baker threw his school bag and cheered loudly. Those are not stories, Grandpa said with a serious face. Yes, that is a real experience. It is your precious experience and contains countless life wisdom, Little Baker quickly agreed. Speaking of it, Dad, the things you tell the little guy every time feel so real, the tour guide asked in a low voice from the side. That's your father's and mine's personal experience. At that time, artillery and missiles had not yet been developed, and the Totem Masters were the most powerful group. Didn't you introduce the Battle of Heaven repeatedly every day? This kind of childish question is still come and ask me. The old man's face darkened. Okay, Sheehan, you always get so excited when you mention these things. These are old almanacs and old things. Say less and watch your heart. Ms. Cymbalina advised with a smile. Remember what you said when you proposed to me? You were so overwhelmed by my strong and majestic appearance. When Baker Sheehan saw his wife's increasingly gentle smile, he suddenly felt weak and his voice became lower and lower. It seems that I have given too much pocket money recently. Bylina looked gentle and kind. Fearless, Little Baker suddenly shouted from the side. Yes. Fearless, the grandfather and grandson quickly ran away. Sheehan pulled his grandson around, but his mind vaguely returned to the war-torn days. No one knows better than him that the War of Three Kings in heaven actually exists in history. Although the aftermath of Heaven's Gate resulted in the near extinction of totem masters, the existence of the totem power and totem light is no longer visible in the world. But only old people who have experienced that era will truly understand that that almost mythical era really existed. With the decline of totem power, the powerful 5-type power he was once proud of now only has the ordinary totem power of a type -1 totem master, which can only be used to release some small magic spells. Moreover, people without the power of totems can no longer see the existence of magic tricks at all. Shi Yan had a feeling that the gate of heaven seemed to be a living creature. After it understood the powerful threat posed by the power of the totem, it began to consciously change the world and let this power gradually die out. I wonder how those old friends are doing now. Involuntarily, he recalled the past events. "Grandpa, show me a new trick quickly, quickly," little Baker shouted mysteriously from the side. The world has finally been changed. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 543. The new royal capital of Kuwaitan, Eseklavid. The sky was blue, and several flocks of birds lined up in a human shape and flew slowly over the royal capital. "Sister, have you taken your medicine today?" In a little old but still gorgeous and neat white building, an old woman with gray hair went up to the small building carrying a vegetable basket, took out the key, opened the door, and walked into the spacious living room. Mrs. Dani, a maid in a white dress, stood at the door and knelt down to salute the old woman. "Thank you for your hard work, Ziani." Dani smiled kindly at the maid. "It's another quiet day." A hoarse old man's voice came from the study at the end of the living room. Dani smiled when she heard this, put down the basket and handed it to the maid, and walked directly into the innermost study. In front of the floor-to-ceiling window of the study, a graceful white-haired old woman was sitting on a red rocking chair. Her face is full of wrinkles, but her eyes are still clear and tranquil, without any of the depression and pessimism of those aging elderly people. "Sister, I bought your favorite slot fish today. I saw someone on the street who had just gotten it from the wild. It was very fresh, so I packed it all for him." Dani walked to the side and opened the curtains wider. "Aren't you going to attend the palace celebration today? Why did you suddenly come to me when you were free?" the lady sitting on the chair asked softly. "Aren't I worried?" Dani smiled. "I saw that, sister, you forgot yesterday's medicine at my place, so I hurriedly sent it over." She took a chair and sat next to her sister Hathaway. The two sisters looked side by side at the blue sky outside, which was clear and relaxed. "Speaking of which, it's been more than 50 years. Time flies so fast." Hathaway sighed. "I wonder how he is doing now. There has been no news from the palace." "It is said that she is still recovering from the sequelae of that battle." Dani nodded, her eyes a little heavy. "What kind of injury requires more than 50 years of repair and is not good?" "I'm afraid there are only those injuries that are almost called terminal illnesses." She has never dared to say the sentence, just for fear of hurting her sister's last hope. More than 50 years have passed. The once large and powerful Kurosawa Palace has now become the second-ranked new royal capital comprehensive university in the world. Since the power of the totem has been weakened and almost extinct, Kurosawa Palace has quickly transformed from the original totem master power into a comprehensive government-run university for the purpose of running schools. With the help of the huge reputation whose core is fighting skills, it has completely stabilized its foothold. Over the years, a large number of talented trainees have emerged among them. Among them, Onsparo, the top genius at the time, became one of the world's greatest martial arts masters. After a series of struggles, he was finally hired as Kuwait's coach. Director of the General Directorate of the Tanzanian Military Department. He also created a new top-level fighting school called Heart Saint Fist, with many disciples distributed all over the world. There is also a girl named Pafaria. After walking out of school, she has now created the Blackbird Gate two-handed weapon fighting school, which has spread throughout the world. In fact, there are many talented students who graduated from Kurosawa Palace, and each of them has started his own career. They are scattered in various walks of life, and almost most of them have achieved considerable achievements, and are at least industry elites. Therefore, the annual Kurosawa class reunion is considered a moderate event in the entire New King City. "Has Onspero been here recently?" Danny suddenly asked. "What's wrong?" "That kid came to visit me a few days ago." Hathaway also had a good impression of the genius who always respected her very much. Ever since Garen disappeared, during the darkest and bleakest period of Kurosawa Palace, that kid still had great respect for him. Even though he had graduated at the time, he still used his own strength to help his classmates and teachers as much as possible. He was a superficial person. Arrogant, but actually a good boy who is very responsible at heart. The issues raised by that boy in the Grand Chamber recently are somewhat radical. In the past few years, the country's strength has increased. It seems that the boy has become a little ambitious again. Danny frowned. "What do Effie and Konkin mean?" "It's okay, I don't object or support it." Danny shook her head. "Then it's hard for me to express my opinion. National affairs are not something we can see clearly based on our personal wishes. Depending on where you stand, you will see different things." Hathaway shook his head and said, "By the way, that boy of yours, how are things?" "It's not the same as before. He took his son and his family to travel to Zizhu, leaving me alone as an old woman." Danny suddenly complained with dissatisfaction. She looked up at her sister's face, which had lost its age, and her heart still trembled. "Sister, you have been waiting for that person for so many years. Is it really worth it?" "Nothing is worth it. Over the years, waiting has become a habit. And I am not lonely at all. Lala, Effie, Angel, and Sylvia all come to see me often. Is it worth it to have so many friends together often?" Hathaway is still alone now. When he was young, he was pursued by many men, but he declined them all. Instead, his sister Danny found a good man. After getting married, they are now considered to be the most elite official family in Khoatan. With 2 sons and 5 or 6 grandchildren, the family is always lively at every gathering. In these years, the eldest princess succeeded the queen, and the royal family became a nominal symbol of honor and spirituality. The real management of national affairs was the Grand Chamber, composed of the 4 giants. Among them, Kurosawa Palace occupies 2 seats and is considered the strongest force in Khoatan. The other 2 parties are the former Grand Duke of White Nok, who represents the eldest princess who is also the current queen, and the other is a representative of the Civil Society Guild. As for the Grand Duke of Koti, he was completely eliminated at a very early stage and disappeared. After the decline of the Totem Master, the radios developed back then still played a huge role. The core of the radio relied on resonance technology rather than the power of the totem, so it could still be used without being affected. This has played an indelible role in accelerating the exchange of information around the world. In the high-speed exchange of large amounts of information technology, the development of science and technology is accelerating like an explosion. Countless workshop researchers in the totem world have switched careers to study science, and have built on their original foundations. Achievements and theories have been achieved that have shocked the world. In just over 50 years, technology has developed from the original level of muskets and steam trains to the current level of biplanes slowly taking off. Various artillery tanks and private technology came into being amidst the turmoil. Huge ships travel between the 2 continents, and countless sea areas are covered with human footprints. After more than 50 years of recuperation and under the policy of vigorously promoting more children in various countries, the number of human beings has increased significantly. While various technologies continue to develop, medical standards have also made tremendous progress. The microscopes, incubators, culture equipment, and other tools originally used by totem masters have been converted into medical services. People's fertility survival rate is getting higher and higher, and everything is developing in an unprecedented direction. In the dark abyss of the Arctic Sea, an extremely huge blue iceberg has completely filled the entire abyss. There is a hollow space at the bottom of the iceberg, where there is a man-made undersea tunnel and square. The square that was originally isolated from the sea water has now been completely occupied by the water flow mixed with broken ice. The square was dim and blue, and groups of fluorescent jellyfish slowly swam by. Their bodies stretched and shrank, and their pale blue shimmering bodies looked peaceful and quiet. The strange thing is that these jellyfish are different from jellyfish in the outside world. The tips of their tentacles have a faint blue-purple fluorescence. Soon, a small group of small spindle-shaped whitebait swam around the square. They also had blue-purple glossy fangs in their mouths and were extremely ferocious. This is a world-famous highly toxic sea area. It does not mean that the sea water is highly toxic, but the species in the sea area. I don't know why, no matter what species, they carry extremely strong toxins. The highly toxic waters are world famous in the Arctic waters. A certain number of tourists come to visit every year. Although the seafood caught here is not edible, the unique species ecology also makes tourists linger here. Deep in the ocean abyss, at the bottom of an iceberg. No one has been in for decades. Since the death of the totem power, no human being has been able to set foot in such a deep ocean bottom. This is the deepest place in the entire Arctic Sea, with a depth of tens of thousands of meters. After continuous measurement and comparison in recent years, people have found that this is one of the deepest abyss in the entire world, ranking second. In the deepest part of the iceberg, in the quiet and peaceful darkness, the strange blue interior of the iceberg suddenly moved slightly, and a subtle clicking sound came out. How long has it been? Garin slowly woke up from his slumber. Opening his eyes, he was surrounded by the same blue ice as before. These ice layers condensed and extended from his body to form a self-protective dormant layer. Outside the ice, the migrating group of poisonous jellyfish swam by once again, and Garin's eyes suddenly became clear. Already another 10 years have passed, he murmured to himself. The group of poisonous jellyfish would swim here every 10 years. So far, this is the 5th time. Has it been 50 years? Garin recalled with a somewhat sluggish mind. I haven't woken up for a full 10 years and have been in a state of repair and recovery. When I woke up suddenly, I couldn't completely regain my consciousness for a while. Since Effie, Kongqin, and the other elders last came here 30 years ago, no one has been here again, this abyss. The huge protective waterproof square that was once supported by the power of totems has completely collapsed at this time, becoming a home paradise for countless deep-sea species. 30 years ago, there were already signs of the totem's power declining. Ephesus, who could only rely on his own strength to get in, had to rely on the joint strength of all the elders to get here. That was the last time Garin saw humans outside. In the following years, he relied on a special radio brought in from outside to communicate with the outside world. Later, even the radio lost energy support and was completely disconnected. After that, he was alone all the time. The power of the totem has declined, but the power of the totem is no longer in Garin's body, replaced by the new power of the secret weapon of life. This power is not affected by the gate of heaven and is still huge and terrifying. This is a qualitative change that breaks through to Type 6, and is no longer the category of totem master. Garin carefully felt the state of his whole body. The secret martial arts on his body have completely settled down. The northern halberd soldier Han Yan Zhen Shui Xiegong, the power of this fused secret martial arts may be similar to the ordinary secret martial arts. However, because the final promotion was interrupted by the backhand of the ghost sect, resulting in the deflection of the skill was abnormal and became an evil skill. Coupled with the severe injuries and sequelae of that battle, Mai Wu fell into a state of deep sleep to repair his body, and he slept for decades. Use the huge sea pressure and extreme cold in the Arctic abyss as food and energy to slowly repair the body's wounds. A person stayed in the endless deep sea for decades. Even a strong and determined totem master like Garen had to fall into an abnormal state of mind. He checked the condition of his body. After killing Gaiman in the last battle, he did not get any potential points. But for the first time in history, attribute talents have undergone new changes. Real changes in the property bar. Power 18, Agile 14, Physique 14, Intelligence 12, Potential 0%, Soul Limit 20. Garen focused his attention on his current attribute bar and did not look at the many extremely complex and cumbersome skill bars behind it. The property bar has been completely changed.